I remember as a child watching on TV a program called Get Your Own Back, and it was a children's program where children could invite on an adult who they wanted to get their own back on. It could be a parent, quite often a parent, or it could be a teacher or someone, and the children would then get to make the adults do a series on uncomfortable challenges and sort of get their revenge on the adults that way. And I was thinking about that, thinking, even from a young age, children are taught that getting your own back is kind of a good thing to do. It's the way that the world works. That if someone does something bad to us, then that gives us the permission to do something bad to them appropriately. I remember at school someone nicks your rubber, and so you take their pencil or whatever. Or if someone kicks you, even if it's not that hard, then you kick them back. And it's that sort of retaliation which the world is built on. And what Jesus says here is actually that's the wrong way of looking at things. He takes the well-known phrase, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and says, actually, that's not the right way of looking at it. Let's turn to what Jesus actually said, Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 42. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. So what was happening in at this time when Jesus was speaking is that people had looked in their scriptures, which we call the Old Testament, and it has this principle, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, and they were applying that as a permission to take personal revenge. That was what was going on, and we've seen this all the way through, that people had misunderstood the law and were really using it as an excuse, as permission to do things which they shouldn't have done. And this is another example here. They took this principle and were using it as an excuse to take revenge. But actually, if they'd have understood it properly, they would have known that was not the case. That this principle was given to judges, not to individuals. This principle was actually given. It's called the lex talionis, which basically just means the punishment should fit the crime. And that's a well-known principle in law. And I think it's quite a right and just one, that if someone commits a not very serious crime, then the punishment should not be very serious. But if someone does something more serious, then the punishment should be more serious. And that's why the imprisonment for taking a life is more than for theft, for example. And so that's that principle, and people were using this to say, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, that's personal revenge. That's permission for me taking revenge on my neighbour if he wrongs me. So Jesus says, no, it shouldn't be like that at all. It should be the very opposite. And what he says is this: I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So he says, look, don't resist, don't take revenge on evil people. And that doesn't mean, by the way, just sort of get involved in sin. We are called to resist the devil and to stand firm against him, to stand firm against what is wrong in the world. We're not called to join in with sin or just to resist in that sense, but rather to actually not be people who treat and meet violence with violence. Elsewhere in the book of Romans, Paul says, overcome evil with good. And that's the thing, that we know that at the end of the day, meeting evil with evil is just going to multiply evil. But if you meet evil with good, then actually it does overcome the evil in the end. And that's a principle which has worked throughout the Bible, really. It's not about overcoming by just retaliating with whatever evil was done to you, but rather doing good in place of that evil. Now, I should be careful to point out that that doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean just allowing people to walk all over you, in a sense, and take advantage in every respect. But I think it means doing what is right and what is best for the person, rather than doing what is evil, rather than seeking to harm them. And that will look different in different situations. I think what Jesus, the principle that he actually says, is that we should go the other way in retaliating, that we should just sort of, if they want a coat, if they want your garment, give them a coat as well, and all that sort of thing. So we should go over the top in doing good. So if someone steals from you, then actually try to find them and say, hey, do you want this as well? And to overcome by doing what is right and good. But that doesn't mean that we need to do that in a sort of thoughtless way. Now, I think this is something which takes a bit of wisdom to practice. Because, for example, when he says, give to the one who asks, do not turn from the one who wants to borrow from you. Sometimes people want to borrow in order to get things they shouldn't. I often I've met people in the past who want money in order so that they can buy alcohol or drugs, for example. I think we're not to say, oh, let's just give money indiscriminately, or let's just do, if someone steals from you, perhaps the best thing is, rather than just giving them more stuff, actually saying, well, what is it that caused you to steal? How can we actually fix this situation and do good, rather than just simply giving them stuff? But I think this is the principle that Jesus is outlining here. Rather than revenge and retaliation, how can we work for the good of those who seek to do us harm? I will admit that I find this a struggle. That when people say things to me, and very often it's not a physical thing, it's words, and people don't respond to me in ways that I like, and people sometimes are insulting or what have you. And sometimes I find it very, very hard to know what the right thing to do is in that situation, and to be nice or whatever, because I kind of want to jump in and say, no, your mother or whatever, something stupid like that. But actually, that's not the way that Jesus calls us. We're not to respond with insults. We're not to respond like for like. We are to respond with what is good and right for that person. So I think that's something to think about. And as I said last time in the video, actually these are things which none of us are capable of fulfilling ourselves. But Jesus was. Jesus was the one who didn't respond to insults with insults. And it talks about that in the book of 1 Peter. But rather he died for his enemies. He died for those who crucified him. He died for those who put him to death and who sought to say crucify him, who wanted to see him dead. And yet, through him we have forgiveness and the power to lead a new life. I think that's, as we come into this, we think about how Jesus himself put these words into practice. And we can look to him as the one who forgives our mistakes, who knows what it is like to be persecuted, who knows what it's like to have people say things about him which are wrong and to be falsely accused and so on. And yet he responded with love. He said, Father, forgive them. He didn't affirm people in everything. He stood up and challenged. He challenged the high priest, the people who were striking him and so on. But at the same time, he responded with love, and he always did what was right for his enemies as well as his friends. I think it's important to think about, as we live our lives, who are those who I find difficult? Who are those who are my enemies? Are those people, how can I love them? How can I show God's love and care for them as much as I can my friends? And perhaps as we pray about it and think about it, God will give us the wisdom and ability to understand this as to how to respond in a right way when people do things to us which are wrong. So I hope that this has been helpful in thinking through what Jesus said here. And the next part is talking about love for enemies, and really this is sort of the counterpart to this. The two of them go together, but really this whole Sermon on the Mount has gone together so far, and I've really been enjoying it. So I hope that you have too. Please do comment below. Please do subscribe to the channel and like the video if you've enjoyed it. There should be a couple of videos on the screen there and suggestions to have a look at next. But thank you very much for watching, everyone. God bless, and I hope to see you again for another video very soon.